Hi, my name is Sean Trihey. I'm a mechanic for the Troy Designs Lucas Oil KTM team. And on this week's How To, presented by Lucas Oil, I'm going to show you how to clean and grease your throttle tube. Alright, well there's several reasons why throttle tube maintenance is particularly important. One, when you crash, if you ever tear a grip and you go down on the right hand side, you can get dirt and grime. You can crack the throttle tube, the cables can become broke, and if you never disassemble it to inspect it, you could end up with a stuck throttle. So the most basic part is just making sure that the clamp surface where the throttle tube clamp is going to go is nice and clean, and then also make sure there's no dirt packed up in the end of the bar. And then just make sure you also inspect throttle cables where they go into the housing. Make sure there's no cracks. Make sure the ends aren't frayed and there's no pieces of steel coming unthreaded. And on these barrels of the cable, just the tiniest little bit of grease is more than enough. The reason why you don't want to use too much is if it goes long enough without being inspected, it can start to attract dirt. But this is something where it's easy enough. It's 2 bolts. It only takes 5 minutes of your time. Once you figure out how the barrels go back together, it's quick and easy, and having good controls just makes the bike feel that much more solid. And then you can clean out the inside of the throttle tube. You can use a T-handle or something long, push down there. Push down, spin it around. After you got all the dirt out of there, just make sure she sounds nice and clean. There's no grit in it. All right, and it's the same thing for the throttle tube. I use just the slightest amount of grease. You don't want to use too much, once again, just because it can attract dirt. Just a nice thin layer where you can hardly even tell. But you'll notice when you put just grease on, it ends up being a little bit thicker of a slower type of motion. You can see it doesn't spin. But we use Toolbox Buddy by Lucas Oil. Just a little tiny bit. It'll bring it around nice. Now when going back together with the throttle cables, on the KTM they have these 2 marks that go back together. And this barrel on the back is the one that's a pull cable, so that's the open cable. And the one on the front is the return cable. So the open cable always goes in the back. Start that, slide it in, and then you just gotta reach around, grab the closed cable, make sure that barrel goes in. Front piece of the housing goes on. Just make sure that the cable is on top of the wheel before you put the rear on. And then when you're tightening the housing, you want to make sure you don't push it in all the way and make the tube drag on the inside of the bar. So the best way to set it is just this little bit of play right here. You pull it out and hold it together just ever so slightly, just to keep the tube from dragging on the back side of the bar. And then when you're tightening them, you can watch the gap on the top and the bottom and just make sure it's even. Make sure you don't tighten one side way more than the other. Then you slide the rubber back on, and you got a factory throttle. All right, so there you have it. We just went over how to clean and grease your throttle tube on this week's How To presented by Lucas Oil.